But still, you wanted to be happy? Yeah, sure, everybody wants to be happy, I reckon. Do you think you ever would be? I don't know. I just went to bed at night and got up in the morning. I just lived from day to day. I thought maybe I would be. How? I don't know, he said in a voice that was almost a moan. What did you think happiness would be like? I don't know. It wouldn't be like this. You ought to have some idea of what you wanted, Bigger. Well, Mr. Max, if I was happy, I wouldn't always be wanting to do something I know I couldn't do. And why did you always want to? I couldn't help it. Everybody feels that way, I reckon. And I did too. Maybe I would have been all right if I could have done something I wanted to do. I wouldn't be scared then, or mad maybe. I wouldn't be always hating folks, and maybe I'd be at home, sort of. Did you ever go to the Southside Boys Table, the place where Mr. Dalton sent those ping pong tables? Yeah, but what the hell can a guy do with ping pong? Do you feel that the club kept you out of trouble? Bigger cocked his head. Kept me out of trouble, he repeated Max's words. Nah, that's where we planned most of our jobs. Did you ever go to church, Bigger? Yeah, when I was little, but that was a long time ago. Your folks were religious? Yeah, they went to church all the time. Why did you stop going? I didn't like it. There was nothing in it. All they did was sing and shout and pray all the time, and it didn't get 'em nothing. All the colored folks do that, but it don't get 'em nothing. The white folks got everything. Did you ever feel happy in church? Nah, I didn't want to. Nobody but poor folks get happy in church. But you are poor, Bigger. Again, Bigger's eyes lit with a bitter and feverish pride. I ain't that poor, he said. But Bigger, you said that if you were where people did not hate you and you did not hate them, you could be happy. Nobody hated you in church. Couldn't you feel at home there? I wanted to be happy in this world, not out of it. I didn't want that kind of happiness. The white folks like for us to be religious. Then they can do what they want with us. A little while ago, you spoke of God getting you for killing these women. Does that mean you believe in Him? I don't know. Aren't you afraid of what will happen to you after you die? Nah, but I don't want to die. Didn't you know that the penalty for killing that white woman would be death? Yeah, I knew it, but I felt like she was killing me, so I didn't care. If you could be happy in religion now, would you want to be? Nah, I'll be dead soon enough. If I was religious, I'd be dead now. But the church promises eternal life. That's for whipped folks. You don't feel like you've had a chance, do you? No, but I ain't asking nobody to be sorry for me. No, I ain't asking that at all. I'm black. They don't give black people a chance, so I took a chance and lost. But I don't care none now. They got me and it's all over. Do you feel, Bigger, that somehow, somewhere, or sometime or other you'll have a chance to make up for what you didn't get here on Earth? Hell no, when they strap me in that chair and turn on the heat, I'm through for always. Bigger, I want to ask you something about your race. Do you love your people? I don't know, Mr. Max. We all black and the white folk treat us the same. But Bigger, your race is doing things for you. There are Negroes leading other people. Yeah, I know. I heard about them. They all right, I guess. Don't you know any of them? Nah. Bigger, are there many Negro boys like you? I reckon so. All of them I know ain't got nothing and ain't going nowhere. Why didn't you go to some of the leaders of your race and tell them how you feel and the other boys felt? Aw, hell, Mr. Max, they wouldn't listen to me. They rich, even though they white folks treat them like they do me. They almost like white people when it comes to guys like me. They say guys like me make it hard for them to get along with white folks. Did you ever hear any of the leaders make speeches? Yeah, sure, at election time. What did you think of them? Well, I don't know, they all the same. They wanted to get elected to office. They wanted money like everybody else. Mr. Max, it's a game and they play it. Why didn't you play it? Hell, what do I know? I ain't got nothing. Nobody'll pay me any attention. I'm just a black guy with nothing. I just went to grammar school, and politics is full of big shots, guys from colleges. Didn't you trust them? I don't reckon they wanted anybody to trust them. They wanted to get elected to office. They paid you to vote. Did you ever vote? Yeah, I voted twice. I wasn't old enough, so I put up my age so I could vote and get paid $5. You didn't mind selling your vote? No, why should I? You didn't think politics could get you anything? You got me $5 on election day. Bigger, did any white people ever talk to you about labor unions? No, nobody but Jan and Mary, but she Anna done it. But I couldn't help what I did. And Jan, I reckon I did him wrong by signing red to that ransom note. Do you believe he's your friend now? Well, he ain't against me. He didn't turn against me today when he was questioning. I don't think he hates me like the others. I suppose he's kind of hurt about Miss Dalton, though. Bigger, do you think you'd ever come to this? Well, to tell you the truth, Mr. Max, it seems sort of natural like me being here facing the death chair. Now I come to think of it, it seems like something like this had to be. They were silent. Max stood up and sighed. Bigger watched to see what Max was thinking, but Max's face was white and blank. Well, Bigger, Max said, we'll enter a plea of not guilty at the arraignment tomorrow, but when the trial comes up, we'll change it to a plea of guilty and ask for mercy. They're rushing the trial. It may be held in 2 or 3 days. I'll tell the judge that all I can of how you feel. I'll try to tell the judge all I can of how you feel and why. I'll try to get him to make a life in prison. That's all I can see under the circumstances. I don't have to tell you how they feel toward you, Bigger. You're a Negro, you know. Don't hope for too much. There's an ocean of hot hate out there against you, and I'm going to try to sweep some of it back. They want your life. They want revenge. They felt they had you fenced off so that you could not do what you did. Now they're mad because deep down in them they believe that they made you do it. When people feel that way, you can't reason with them. Then, too, a lot depends on the judge we have. Any 12 white men in the state will have already condemned you. We can't trust a jury. Well, Bigger, I'll just do the best I can. They were silent. Max gave him another cigarette and took one for himself. Bigger watched Max's head of white hair, his long face, the deep, gray, soft, sad eyes. He felt that Max was kind, and he felt sorry for him. Mr. Max, if I was you, I wouldn't worry none. If all folks was like you, then maybe I wouldn't be here. But you can't help me now. You're going to hate you for trying to help me. I'm gone. They got me. Oh, they'll hate me, yes, said Max. But I can take it. That's the difference. I'm a Jew and they hate me, but I know why and I can fight. But sometimes you can't win no matter how hard you fight. That is, you can't win if you haven't got time, and they're pressing us now. But you need not worry about their hating me for defending you. The fear of hate keeps many white folks from trying to help you and your kind. Before I can fight your battle, I've got to fight a battle with them. Max snuffed out a cigarette. I've got to go now, Max said. He turned and faced Bigger. Bigger, how do you feel? I don't know. I'm just sitting here waiting for him to come and tell me to walk to the chair, and I don't know if I'll be able to walk or not. Max averted his face and opened the door. A guard came in and caught Bigger by the wrist. I'll see you in the morning, Bigger, Max called. Back in his cell, Bigger stood in the middle of the floor, not moving. He was not stoop-shouldered now, nor were his muscles taut. He breathed softly, wondering about the cool breath of peace that hovered in his body. It was as though he were trying to listen to the beat of his own heart. All around him was darkness, and there were no sounds. He could not remember when he had felt as relaxed as this before. He had not thought of it or felt it while Max was speaking to him. It was not until after Max had gone that he discovered that he had spoken to Max as he'd never spoken to anyone in his life, not even himself. And after talking had ceased from his shoulders a heavy burden. Then he was suddenly and violently angry. Max had tripped him. No, Max had not compelled him to talk. He had talked of his own accord, prodded by excitement, by curiosity about his own feelings. Max only sat and listened. He had only asked questions. His anger passed and fear took its place. If he were as confused as this when the time came, they really would have to drag him to the chair. He had to make a decision. In order to walk to that chair, he had to weave his feelings into a hard shield of either hope or hate. To fall between them would mean living and dying in a fog of fear. He was balanced on a hairline now, but there was no one to push him forward or backward. No one but himself. He brushed his hands across his eyes, hoping to untangle the sensations fluttering in his body. He lived in a thin, hard core of consciousness. He felt time slipping by. The darkness around him lived, breathed, and he was in the midst of it, wanting again to let his body taste of that short respite of rest he had felt after talking with Max. He sat down on the cot. He had to grasp this thing. Why had Max asked him all those questions? He knew that Max was seeking facts to tell the judge, but in Max's asking of those questions, he had felt a recognition of his life, of his feelings, of this person he had never encountered before. What was this? Had he done wrong? Had he let himself in for another betrayal? He felt as though he had been caught off guard. But this confidence, he had no right to be proud. Yet he had spoken to Max as a man who had something. He had told Max that he did not want religion, that he had not stayed in his place. He had no right to feel that, no right to forget that he was to die, that he was a murderer. He had no right to forget that, not even for a second, yet he had. He wondered if all this were possible, that after all everybody in the world felt alike. Did those who hated him have in them the same thing Max had seen in him, the thing that had made Max ask him those questions? And what motive could Max have in helping? Why would Max risk the white tide of hate to help him? For the first time in his life, he had gained a pinnacle of feeling upon which he could stand and see vague relations that he had never dreamed of. And that white looming mountain of hate were not a mountain at all, but people like himself and like Jan. Then he was faced with a high hope like that of which he had never thought could be, and a despair the full depths of which he knew could not stand to feel. A strong counter-emotion waxed in him, urging him, warning him to leave his newly seen and newly felt thing alone, that it would lead him to be but another blind alley to a deeper hate and shame. Yet he saw and felt but one life, and that one life was more than a sleep, a dream. Life was all life had. He knew that he would now not wake up sometime later after death and sigh at how simple and foolish his dream had been. The life he saw was short, and his sense of it goaded him. He was seized with a nervous eagerness. He stood up in the middle of the cell floor and tried to see himself in the relation to other men, a thing he had always feared to try to do, so deeply stained was his own mind with the hate of others for him. With this new sense of value of himself gained from Max's talk, a sense fleeting and obscure, he tried to feel that if Max had been able to see the man in him beneath those wild and cruel acts of his, acts of fear and hate and murder and flight and despair, then he too would hate. If he were they, just now as he was hating them and they were hating him. For the first time in his life, he felt grounded beneath his feet, and he wanted it to stay there. He was tired, sleepy, and feverish, but he did not want to lie down with this war raging in him. Blind impulses welled up in his body, and his intelligence sought to make them plain to his understanding by supplying images that would explain them. Why was all this hate and fear? Standing trembling in a cell, he saw a vast, dark, fluid image rise and float. He saw a black, sprawling prison full of tiny black cells in which people lived. Each cell had a stone jar of water and a crust of bread, and no one could go from cell to cell, and there were screams and curses and yells of suffering, and nobody heard them, for the walls were thick and darkness was everywhere. Why were there so many cells in the world? But was this true? He wanted to believe, but was afraid. Dare he flatter himself that much? Would he be struck dead if he made himself the equal of others, even in fancy? He was too weak to stand any longer. He sat again on the edge of the cot. How could he find out if this feeling was true, if others had it? How could he find out about life when one was about to die? Slowly he lifted his hands in the darkness and held them in midair, the fingers spread weakly open. If he reached out with his hands, and if his hands were electric wires, and if his heart were a battery giving life and fire to those hands, and if he reached out and touched hands and touched other people, reached out through these stone walls and felt other hands connected with other hearts, if he did that, there would be a reply, a shock. Not that he wanted those hearts to turn their warmths to him. He was not wanting that much, but just to know that they were there and warm. Just that and no more. And it would have been enough, more than enough. And in that touch, responsive recognition, there would be union, identity. There would be supporting oneness, a wholeness which had been denied him all his life. Another impulse rose in him, born of desperate need, and his mind clothed it in an image of strong, blinding sun sending hot rays down, and he was standing in the midst of a vast crowd of men, white men and black men and all men, and the sun's rays melted away the many differences, the colors, the clothes, and drew what was common and good upward towards the sun. He stretched out full upon the cot and groaned. Was he foolish in this feeling? Was it fear and weakness that made this desire come to him now that death was near? How could a notion that went so deep and caught so much of him in one swoop of emotion be wrong? Could he trust bare naked feelings this way? But he had. All his life he hated on the basis of bare sensation. Why should he not accept this? He had killed Mary and Bessie and brought sorrow to his mother and brother and sister and put himself in the shadow of the electric chair only to find this? Had he been blind all along? But there was no way to tell now. It was too late. He would not mind dying now if he could only find out what this meant. That what in relation to all the others that lived, the earth upon which he stood. Was there some battle everybody was fighting and he missed it? And if he had missed it, were not the whites to blame for it? Were they not the ones to hate even now? Maybe. But now he was not interested in hating them. He had to die. It was more important to him to find out what this new tingling, this new elation, this new excitement meant. He felt he wanted to live now, not escape paying for his crime, but live in order to find out, to see if it were true, and to feel it more deeply. And if he had to die within it. He felt that he would have lost all if he had to die without fully feeling it, without knowing for certain. But there was no way to know. It was too late. He lifted his hands to his face and touched his trembling lips. Nah, nah. He ran to the door and caught the cold steel bars in his hands and gripped them tightly, holding himself erect. His face rested against the bars, and he felt tears roll down his cheeks. His wet lips tasted salt. He sank to his knees and sobbed, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die." Having been bound over to the grand jury and indicted by it, having been arraigned and having pled not guilty to the charge of murder and been ordered to trial, all in less than a week, Bigger lay in one sunless gray morning on his cot, staring vacantly at the black steel bars of the Cook County Jail. Within an hour he'd be taken to court where they would tell him if he was to live or die and when. And with but a few minutes between him and the beginning of judgment, the obscure longing to possess that thing which Max had dimly evoked in him was still a motive. He felt he had to have it now. How could he face the court of white men without something to sustain him? Since that night when he had stood alone in his cell, feeling the high magic with Max's talks had given him, he was more than ever naked to the hot blasts of hate. There were moments when he wished bitterly that he had not felt those possibilities, when he wished that he could go again behind this curtain, but that was impossible. He had been lured into the open and trapped, twice trapped by being in jail for murder, and trapped again by being stripped of emotional resources to go to his death. In an effort to recapture that moment, he had tried to talk with Max, but Max was preoccupied, busy preparing his plea to the court to save his life. But Bigger wanted to save his own life. Yet he knew that the moment he tried to put his feelings into words, his tongue would not move. Many times when alone after Max had left him, he wondered wistfully if there was not a set of words which he had in common with others, words which would evoke in him and others a sense of the same fire that smoldered in him. He looked out upon the world and the people about him with double vision. One vision pictured death, an image of him alone, sitting strapped in the electric chair and waiting for the hot current to leap through his body. And the other vision pictured life, an image of himself standing amid throngs of men, lost in the welter of their lives with the hope of emerging again, different, unafraid. But so far, only the certainty of death was his. Only the unabating hate of the white faces could be seen. Only the same dark cell, the same lonely long hours, only the cold bars remained. He had his will to believe in a new picture of the world, made him act a fool, and thoughtlessly pile horror upon horror. Was not his old hate a better defense against this agonized uncertainty? Was not an impossible hope betraying him to his end? Oh, how many fronts could a man fight at once? Could he fight a battle within as well as without? He felt that he could not fight the battle for his life without first winning the one raging within him. His mother and Vera and Buddy had come to visit him, and he again had lied to them, telling him he was praying, that he was at peace with the world and men. But that lie had only made him feel more shame for himself and more hate for them. It had hurt him because he really yearned for that certainty of which his mother spoke and prayed, but he could not get it on the terms in which he felt he had to have it. After they left, he told Max not to let them come again. A few moments before the trial, a guard came to his cell and left a paper. "Your lawyer sent this," he said, and left. He unfolded the Tribune, and his eyes caught a headline: "Troop Guard Negro Killer's Trial." Troops, he bent forward and read. "Protect rapists from mob action." He went down the column. Fearing outbreaks of mob violence, Governor H.M.O. Dorsey ordered out 2 regiments of the Illinois National Guard to keep public peace during the trial of Bigger Thomas, Negro rapist and killer. It was announced from Springfield, the capital, this morning. His eyes caught phrases: "Sentiment against killers still rising," "Public opinion demands death penalty," "Fear uprising in Negro sector," and "Tense city." Bigger sighed and stared into space. His lips hung open and he shook his head slowly. Was he not foolish in even listening when Max talked of saving his life? Was he not heightening the horror of his own end by staining after a flickering hope? Had not this voice of hate been sounding long before he was born, and would it not still sound long after he was dead? He read again, catching phrases: "The black killer is fully aware that he is in danger of going to the electric chair," spent most of his time reading newspaper accounts of his crime and eating luxurious meals sent to him by communist friends. Killer not sociable or talkative. Mayor lauds police for bravery, and a vast mass of evidence assembled against killer. Then, in relation to the Negro's mental condition, Dr. Calvin H. Robinson, a psychiatric attaché of the police department, declared, "There is no question but that Bigger Thomas is more alert mentally and more cagey than we suspect. His attempt to blame the communists for the murder and kidnap note and his staunch denial of having raped the white girl indicate that he may be hiding many other crimes." Professional psychologists at University of Chicago pointed out this morning that the white movement have an unusual fascination for Negro men. "They think," said one of the professors who requested that his name not be mentioned in connection with the case, "that white women are more attractive than women of their own race. They just can't help themselves." It was said that Boris A. Max, the Negro's communist lawyer, will enter a plea of not guilty and try to free his client through a long, drawn-out trial jury. Bigger dropped the paper, stretched out upon the cot, and closed his eyes. It was the same thing over and over again. What was the use of reading it? "Bigger." Max was standing outside of the cell. The guard opened the door and Max walked in. "Well, Bigger, how do you feel?" "All right, I reckon," he mumbled. "We're on our way to court." Bigger rose and looked vacantly around the cell. "Are you ready?" "Yeah," Bigger sighed. "I reckon I am." "Listen, son, don't be nervous. Just take it easy." "Will I be sitting near you?" "Sure, right at the same table. I'll be there throughout the entire trial, so don't be scared." A guard led him outside the door. The corridor was lined with policemen. It was silent. He was placed between 2 policemen with wrists shackled to theirs. Black and white faces peered at him from behind steel bars. He walked stiffly between the 2 policemen. Ahead of him walked 6 more, and he heard many more walking in the back. They led him to the elevator that took him to the underground passage. They walked through a long stretch of narrow tunnel. The sound of their feet echoed loudly in the stillness. They reached another elevator and rode up and walked along a hallway crowded with excited people and policemen. They passed a window and Bigger caught a glimpse of the vast crowd of people standing closely formed lines of khaki-clad troops. Yes, those were the troops and the mob the paper had spoken of. He was taken into a room. Max led the way to a table. After the handcuffs were unlocked, Bigger sat, flanked by policemen. Softly, Max laid his right hand upon Bigger's knee. "We've got just a few minutes," Max said. "Yeah," Bigger mumbled. His eyes were half closed, his head leaned slightly to one side, and his eyes looked beyond Max at some point in space. "Here," Max said, "straighten your tie." Bigger tugged listlessly at the knot. "Now, maybe you'll have to say something just once, see? You mean in the courtroom? Yes, but I'll..." Bigger's eyes widened with fear. "Nah. Now listen, son, but I don't want to say anything. I'm trying to save your life." Bigger's nerves gave way and he spoke hysterically. "They're going to kill me. You know they're going to kill me. But you'll have to, Bigger. Now listen. Can't you fix it so I won't have to say nothing? It's only a word or two. When the judge asks how you want to plead, say guilty. Will I have to stand up? Yes. I don't want to. Don't you realize I'm trying to save your life? Help me just this little bit." "I reckon I don't care. I reckon you can't save it." "You mustn't feel that way. I can't help it. Here's another thing. The court will be full, see? Just go in and sit down. You'll be right by me. And let the judge see that you notice what's going on. I hope Mom won't be there. I asked her to come. I want the judge to see her," Max said. "She'll feel bad. All of this is for you, Bigger. I reckon I ain't worth it." "Well, this is the thing. This thing's bigger than you, son. In a certain sense, every Negro in America's on trial out here today. They're going to kill me anyhow. Not if we fight. Not if I tell them how you've had to live." A policeman walked over to Max, tapped him lightly on the shoulder, and said, "The judge is waiting." "All right," Max said. "Come on, Bigger. Let's go. Keep your chin up." They stood and were surrounded by policemen. Bigger walked beside Max down a hallway and then through a door. He saw a huge room crowded with men and women. Then he saw a small knot of black faces over to one side of the room, behind a railing. A deep buzzing of voices came to him. Two policemen pushed the people to one side, making a path for Bigger and Max. Bigger moved forward slowly, feeling Max's hand tugging at the sleeve of his coat. They reached the front of the room. "Sit down," Max whispered. As Bigger sat, the lighting of silver bullets flashed in his eyes. They were taking more pictures of him. He was so tense in mind and body that his lips trembled. He did not know what to do with his hands. He wanted to put them in his coat pockets, but that would take too much effort and would attract attention. He kept them lying on his knees, palms up. There was a long and painful wait. The voices behind him still buzzed. Pale yellow sunshine fell through high windows and slashed the air. He looked about. Yes, there were his mother and brother and sister. They were staring at him. There were many of his old schoolmates. There was his teacher, two of them, and there was G.H. and Jack and Gus and Doc. Bigger lowered his eyes. These were the people to whom he had once boasted, acted tough, people whom he had once defied. Now they were watching him as he sat here. They would feel that they were right and he was wrong. The old hot choking sensation came back to his stomach and throat. Why could they not just shoot him and get him over with? They were going to kill him anyhow, so why make him go through with this? He was startled by the sound of a deep, hollow voice booming and a banging on a wooden table. "Everybody please rise." Everybody stood up. Bigger felt Max's hand touching his arm, and he rose and stood with Max. A man draped in long black robes with a dead white face came through the rear door and sat behind a high pulpit-like railing. That's the judge, Bigger thought, easing back into his seat. Hear ye, hear ye. Bigger heard the hollow voice booming again. He caught snatches of phrases. This honorable branch of the County Criminal Court, now in session, pursuant to adjournment, the Honorable Chief Justice Alvin C. Hanley presiding. Bigger saw the judge look toward Buckley and then toward him and Max. Buckley rose and went to the foot of the railing. Max also rose and went forward. They talked a moment to the judge in low voices, and then each went back to his seat. A man sitting just below the judge rose and began reading a long paper in a voice so thick and low that Bigger could hear only some of the words. Indictment number 666-983, the people of the state of Illinois versus Bigger Thomas. The grand jurors chosen, selected, sworn in, and for said County of Cook present that Bigger Thomas did rape and inflict sexual injury upon the body, strangulation by hand, smother to death, and dispose of the body by burning in the furnace, did with knife and hatchet severed from the body, said acts committed upon one Mary Dalton, and contrary to the form of the statute in such case made and provided against the peace and dignity of the people of the state of Illinois. The man pronounced Bigger's name over and over again, and Bigger felt that he was caught up in a vast but delicate machine whose wheels would whir no matter what was pitted against them. Over and over the man said that he had killed Mary and Bessie, that he had beheaded Mary, that he had battered Bessie with a brick, that he had raped both Bessie and Mary, that he shoved Mary in the furnace, that he had thrown Bessie down the air shaft and left her to freeze to death, and that he had stayed in the Dalton home when Mary's body was burning and had sent a kidnap note. When the man finished, a gasp of astonishment came from the courtroom, and Bigger saw faces turning and looking in his direction. The judge rapped for order and asked, "Is the defendant ready to enter a plea to his indictment?" Max rose. "Yes, Your Honor. The defendant, Bigger Thomas, pleads guilty." Immediately, Bigger heard a loud commotion. He turned his head and saw several men pushing through the crowd toward the door. He knew that they were newspapermen. The judge rapped again for order. Max tried to continue speaking, but the judge stopped him. "Just a minute, Mr. Max. We must have order." The room grew quiet. "Your Honor," Max said, "after long and honest deliberation, I've determined to make a motion in the court to withdraw our plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty. The laws of the state allow this offering of evidence and mitigation of punishment, and I shall request, at such time as the court deems best, that I be given the opportunity to offer evidence as to the mental and emotional attitude of this boy, to show the degree of responsibility he had in his crimes. Also, I want to offer evidence as to the youth of this boy. Further, I want to prevail upon this court to consider this boy's plea of guilty as evidence mitigating his punishment." "Your Honor," Buckley shouted. "Allow me to finish," Max said. Buckley came to the front of the room, his face red. "You cannot plead that the boy both guilty and insane," Buckley said. "If you claim Bigger Thomas is insane, the state will demand a jury trial." "Your Honor," Max said, "I do not claim that this boy is legally insane. I shall endeavor to show, through the discussion of the evidence, the mental and emotional attitude of this boy and the degree of responsibility he had in these crimes." "That's a defense of insanity," Buckley shouted. "I'm making no such defense," Max said. "A man is either sane or insane," Buckley said. "There are degrees of insanity," Max said. "The laws of the state permit the hearing of evidence to ascertain the degree of responsibility. And also, the law permits the offering of evidence toward the mitigation of punishment. The state will submit witnesses and evidence to establish the legal sanity of the defendant," Buckley said. There was a long argument which Bigger did not understand. The judge called both lawyers forward to the railing, and they talked for over an hour. Finally, they went back to their seats, and the judge looked towards Bigger and said, "Bigger Thomas, will you rise?" His body flushed hot. As he had felt when he stood over the bed with the white blur floating toward him, as he had felt when he had sat in the car between Jan and Mary, as he had felt when he had been seen Gus coming through the door of Doc's pool room, so he felt now, constricted, taut, in the grip of a powerful, impelling fear. That moment it seemed that any action under heaven would have been preferable to standing. He wanted to leap from his chair and swing some heavy weapon and end his unequal fight. Max caught his arm. "Stand up, Bigger." He rose, holding onto the edge of the table, his knees trembling so that he thought they would buckle under him. The judge looked at him a long time before speaking. Behind him, Bigger heard the room buzzing with the sound of voices. The judge rapped for order. "How far did you get in school?" the judge asked. "8th grade," Bigger whispered, surprised at the question. "If your plea is guilty, and the plea is entered in this case," the judge said and paused, "the court may sentence you to death." The judge said and paused again, "Or the court may sentence you to the penitentiary for the term of your natural life." The judge said and paused yet again, "Or the court may sentence you to the penitentiary for a term of not less than 14 years. Do you understand what I have said?" Bigger looked at Max. Max nodded to him. "Speak up," the judge said. "If you do not understand what I said, then say so." "Yes, I understood," he said. "Then, realizing the consequences of your plea, do you still plead guilty?" "Yes, sir," he whispered again, feeling that it was all wild and intense dream that must end soon, somehow. "That's all. You may sit down," the judge said. He sat. "Is the state prepared to present its evidence and witnesses?" the judge asked. "We are, Your Honor," said Buckley, rising and half-facing the judge and the crowd. "Your Honor, my statement this time will be very brief. There is no need for me to picture to this court the horrible details of these dastardly crimes. The array of witnesses for the state, the confession made and signed by the defendant himself, and the concrete evidence will reveal the unnatural aspect of this vile offense against God and man more eloquently than I ever dare. In more than one respect, I am thankful that this is the case, for some of the facts of this evil crime are so fantastic and unbelievable, so utterly beast-like and foreign to our whole concept of life, that I feel incapable of communicating them to this court. Never in my long career as an officer of the people have I been placed in a position where I felt more unalterably certain of my duty. There is no room here for evasive, rhetorical, theoretical, or fanciful interpretations of the law." Buckley paused, surveyed the courtroom, then stepped to the table and lifted from it the knife with which Bigger had severed Mary's head from her body. "This case is as clean-cut as the murderer's knife, the knife that dismembered an innocent girl," Buckley shouted. He paused again and lifted from the table the brick with which Bigger had battered Bessie in the abandoned building. "Your Honor, this case is as solid as this brick, the brick that battered a poor girl's brains out." Buckley again looked at the crowd in the courtroom. "It is not often," Buckley continued, "that a representative of the people finds the masses of citizens who elected him to office standing literally at his back, waiting for him to enforce the law." The room was quiet as a tomb. Buckley strode to the window and with one motion of his hand hoisted it open. The rumbling mutter of the vast mob swept in. The courtroom stirred. "Kill him now! Lynch him!" The judge rapped for order. "If this is not stopped, I'll order the room cleared," the judge said. Max was on his feet. "I object," Max said. "This is highly irregular. In effect, it's an attempt to intimidate this court." "Objection sustained," the judge said. "Proceed in a fashion more in keeping with the dignity of your office in this court, Mr. State's Attorney." "Very sorry, Your Honor," Buckley said, going toward the railing and wiping his face with a handkerchief. "I was laboring under too much emotion. I merely wanted to impress upon the court the urgency of this situation."